afternoon. I do have slides today, and I will be speaking to you about why the metaverse can't exist without the blockchain. We will explore the metaverse and what effects it will have on social media. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Janice Farrar-Samani. It's a pleasure to be here with you today on this inaugural event of MetaQuake Symposium here in Washington, D.C. I am the CEO of FSG. We are a digital transformation company that focuses on big data, developing the infrastructure for blockchain, as well as the application of the technology itself to build platforms that can move and develop within this new frontier of technology. I will be joined today with my colleague via DTX, James McCoy, who will also introduce himself to you. James, next slide,
Hi,
please.
hi everyone. My name is James McCoy. I'm currently a fifth-year PhD student at Howard University, where I'm finishing my doctoral studies in computer science. I'm a practitioner in this space, currently an emerging technology fellow at the Census Bureau, and I am also the owner of Cutline, which is a digital access management platform that helps artists and brands grow their presence within this space. So very excited to be here today to really continue to discuss these innovative technologies with you all.
James and I connected and vibed off of this emerging technology of blockchain and metaverse. So it's going to be really exciting to hear his insights as we go through our presentation today. So next slide. As we look at this topic of the impact and the imprint of blockchain on the metaverse, I'd like to examine these objectives for you to understand and have a clear vision of blockchain and how it's built on metaverse, as well as learning what digital assets are. That's pretty important. In addition to developing the difference between open and closed metaverses, and explore metaverse and its effect on social media. Next slide. The idea of blockchain supports a decentralized and visible digital evidence of the value and transfer of a 0 and 1, which is in computer language, that allows for you to manage as well as compete. So if we think about blockchain as verse is a virtual realm with endless possibilities. And it has the opportunity to combine the physical as well as the virtual and the digital realities. Next slide. So understanding how blockchain is building the block for metaverse, let's take a deeper dive and begin to explore what exactly is blockchain, what is the metaverse, and how are they interdependent, meaning how do they work together to develop metaverse as well as allow for the users to be able to enjoy function within that space. Next slide. So what is blockchain? Blockchain is a technology that enables this digital transactions to actually be secure and to be stored and shared across decentralized network. Distributed, as well as it has 4 different aspects which focus on the public ledger, private ledger, as well as a consortium. Utilizing our digital assets and actually developing records and transactions that are secured. the digital, and speaking about digital, I really wanted to break that down because that's a term that's kind of tossed around. So if we think about digital, it really is a computer language. It's zeros and ones. And in computer science as well as statistics, we look at it as a computer language, a binary. But that binary language actually holds value. Each one of those zeros and ones has an intrinsic value that is transcribed to actually make that value. I hope that that helps with some clarification. So it represents a physical quantitative value. Blockchain actually acts as a secure, undecentralized, transparent data container. And when I teach blockchain, when it's one-on-one or in a classroom setting, I physically have a box and I open the box to have the transactions flow into the box. And I have the attendees or my students actually write down what those transactions are, hence building their ledgers. They put them inside the box, and then we close the box for validation. That allows for a physical understanding of exactly how blockchain functions, and we'll go into more depth. So at its core, blockchain is powered by computers running algorithms called miners. These are created on new blocks of data that are linked together, hence making a chain. This chain is consistently growing with each transaction and activity, as well as it's updated. So this is impossible to tamper or to manipulate. So there, as I mentioned, there are four different types of blockchain. I just want to make sure that I'm going to re-articulate them so we can follow along. We have public blockchain, which actually has permission for distributive ledger that no one, that anyone can join, hence public blockchain. There is private blockchain, which is a network which operates in a private context. It's a restricted network that is controlled by a single identity. Then we have hybrid blockchain, which is often referred to as a combination of both public and private, hence hybrid. Then we have consortium blockchain, which is a combination of multiple private blockchains that belong to different organizations, where each of these form a node, a meeting place on the chain where the stakeholders are in alliance. So the multiple organizations can exist on a blockchain, allowing for them to share their data across the networks privately and securely. Next slide. So there are 6 key features that I'm sharing with you today, and we probably could ideate and there may be more. But 6, let's just highlight these 6. It cannot be corrupted. Hence, it's secure. It's decentralized technology, meaning that it is not controlled by one center. It enhances our security, hence providing trust. The fourth is its distributed ledgers. Again, keeping track, a record of all of the transactions as well as their values. There's consensus. Of course, it's based upon the type of blockchain that you have, but there's a consensus from the stakeholders. And sixth, you have the fastest settlement as far as acquiring the actual value within your chain. Next slide. So as we look at this roadmap, I think it's really fun to think about how blockchain actually occurs. So we begin with someone actually making a transaction. Secondly, so you have the computer there, that's your starting point. Secondly, we are to request the actual data, which is broadcast. Third, you're looking to actually validate. The validation begins to take place. Fourth, the transaction moves into cryptocurrency if it applies, or you actually, I like to give this example of, think of yourself purchasing something at a restaurant, and you have, now they bring the POS systems to the table. They no longer take your card and walk away with it. So they're using a device. Within that device, there are coding that takes place that syncs with your credit card or your debit card. So once your card goes into that system, that device, it allows for the restaurant or whatever vendor you're using to actually validate whether or not the funds exist. So that is at the point where they say yes or no. So then when it is identified that you actually have the funds, then the transaction takes place. The funds are validated. A block is actually created that states your record. If you recall, say for instance, you're buying something on online, not to mention any retailers, and you end up having to repeat your purchase or you want to buy again. Interestingly enough, they usually hold your information regardless of you opting out. You'll begin to put in your information, and then all of a sudden, the last four digits of your card will pop up and they'll ask for your CVV. Isn't that intriguing? Because a block has actually been created. So that transaction is completed. So think about if crypto, which is not blockchain, it's a currency that actually functions on the chain. If crypto is actually involved, then there's a storage electronically in the chain. And that storage is encrypted to actually control all of the transactions. And importantly to note, it holds that information, encryption information, as well as monitoring the actual transaction of funds. That is when crypto is engaged. Next slide. So, what is metaverse? I think all minds are clear about blockchain. If not, please feel free to ask questions shortly. So, what is metaverse? Many various definitions of what is metaverse actually explain a combination of opportunities where you're actually creating in the openness. Sometimes metaverse is seen as money, or it's self-sustainable communities that are actually in the virtual space, sharing, cooperative, or cooperating with others, as well as a network. There are many features in the metaverse. We need to grasp onto two things before we go into a formal explanation of the metaverse. Metadata and internet are other data or extra data, such as email addresses, phone numbers and addresses, for example, are metadata. We may also think about things like hobbies and what we like to, or what we don't like about them. And their objectives and their own locations are also called metadata. those things on the internet that I mentioned that reoccur. So let's think about the internet of metadata because metadata is also linked to us. So let's think about metaverse. So the metaverse actually has quite a long history. It allows for us to actually do those cooperative activities in a virtual space. I have an avatar, and her name is AI Girl. And we actually have created our own metaverse so we can have a gallery of art and activities. I'm looking forward to actually teaching classes in the metaverse or having meetings in the metaverse. I recently spoke at a conference, the Canto conference, that supports the Caribbean islands. And there we talked about actually developing the workforce on the metaverse, the hiring practices, as well as trainings that could take place in the metaverse. It would allow for anti bias and level setting using technology. Why is that? Because you do not have that physical being. The actual avatar allows for you to be your alter ego, if you will. It takes away maybe some of the biases that one would have about a particular candidate. Some like it and some do not, but I think it's quite intriguing. I'm also considering if I teach a class, and when I teach a class specifically on engineering or engineering topic, to see how many girls actually choose boy avatars and how many boys may choose girl avatars. And it would be, or them, if you will, a binary gender, a transgender. I think it would be fascinating to do a study such as that. And if anyone has such a study, please let me know. I'm intrigued by that. Next slide. There are key elements in the metaverse, the avatars that I shared with you, as well as VR devices, cryptocurrency, which is not blockchain. It's critical to know that. The development of NFTs, non tangible tokens, as well as virtual environments. These are key elements for the metaverse. Next slide. So, what exactly does it mean to build a metaverse? I shared with you that, first of all, I built my avatar. And so, through that, I'm actually able to have various experiences, these levels and these layers within the metaverse. John Radford describes the metaverse as a digital environment made up of 7 distinct layers that actually represent different phases. These phases must work together from the experience people seek to the enabling technologies that make them possible. And I would like to add that it is about the experience that you have in your metaverse at these various levels. Some are more intense than others, and they actually have more of an experiential understanding of how the metaverse truly works as far as gaming, 3D, or interviewing, such as what we were sharing earlier. Next slide. And so, with this graph, I just wanted to share with you how the devices are actually a core part of implementing the metaverse. It uses artificial intelligence, is pushed into the cloud. It is the Internet of Things because it's the aggregation of many technologies, of course, blockchain, and then we're working off of 5G and into 6G now. Thank you. So, in looking at how these are actually built, next slide, there is a framework, and I've shared with you the various layers. And in thinking about the framework, we can consider the autonomy of how the user interfaces with our metaverse. So we have our standard as well as our AR and VR, and they all work on this decentralized chain. Next slide. So looking at the framework, it uses at the user experience and their various cases, from the content of gaming and working to utilizing the payment system that I shared with you as an example, to asset management if you're looking at wealth investment or financial services, to the actual infrastructure and interface which utilizes various engines. So it sounds somewhat technical, but we start looking at how we can see ourselves virtually. There's a platform, we have our avatar, we talk and actually creating those assets as well as the computing and the programming itself. And it's all based upon an infrastructure. My company builds infrastructures for blockchain. In the identification of how you want to build your infrastructure, you want to integrate your network as well as your hardware. And the key function is knowing exactly what your customer needs are so the infrastructure can be built correctly along with the actual bandwidth. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just talk briefly about the open and close, and then I'd like to hear more from you. So we'll be open up for Q&A as well as James will chime in. So here we will have our metaverse. In talking about that, it's open as well as closed. An open metaverse provides us a platform for exchange digital assets as far as currency, characteristics, friendly trade, as well as exposing the engagement with content. If you think about an open metaverse, what comes to mind? I'll give you a moment to think about it. Maybe someone here in the audience could share. An open metaverse?
Uh, I just think of a open world concept.
Open road concept.
Open world.
Oh, open world. Yes. Yes. Facebook also is an open metaverse. Absolutely. So open metaverses, thank you for that. Open metaverses also use blockchain technology to create decentralized ledger that we need for the transaction and the interaction, allowing for greater transparency. A closed metaverse are controlled by single organizations that actually prevent the use of digital assets outside of their boundaries. Additionally, users in a closed metaverse cannot transfer the digital assets or characteristics on their platform. So now we'll talk digital. Next slide. Next slide. So when thinking about what a digital asset, thank you. A digital asset is thought of as a stored, again, those zeros and ones that allow us to utilize that computer language, that computer aided technology that is unique and identifiable to that organization. It is a value. A digital asset can be a document, it can be an audio recording, as well as video, logos, slide presentations, and websites. They're all considered to be digital assets. Anything that utilizes the computer as a storage. Yeah. Blockchain also are technical solutions enables the digital asset. Again, I'll repeat that. Blockchains are the technology solutions that enable these digital assets. The metaverse is a virtual realm with endless possibilities, as I shared earlier, creating and combining all of these physical aspects. Because keep in mind, I created my avatar, but she cannot function without me. I have to, if it's on the computer, I have to utilize my arrow key or my mouse pad or a command in order to have her function. If I have my controllers, then I'm actually able to move, pick up items, and move a lot easier as opposed to, well, using the IXP within the programming itself. Next slide. Digital assets. So here we're building, yes, building our blockchain. So I just thought that this was really fun to think about the gaming aspect of the metaverse and how we can utilize our avatars within that confined space for gaming, because gaming was initially what a lot of people thought the metaverse would be used for. But I've given several examples of how it also can be used. Next slide, please. In a very secure environment. Here's some additional applications of metaverse, just to reiterate. I mentioned education, key factor. I love the idea of utilizing the metaverse, as well as business for recruiting, hiring, training, onboarding. I shared that with you, and having meetings, because many of us are still virtual, as well as healthcare. The metaverse is utilized for surgeries and for to allow for 3D ramifications of our physical being before a doctor actually predict what the symptoms may be. The military utilizes the metaverse extensively, as well as manufacturing. Within the IT space, we are also in the manufacturing space, because we are manufacturing the technology that is integrated with blockchain. And also the automotive industry. I'll throw that as, there's many industries that are utilizing it for manufacturing. And then the arts. The this is where my colleague James could share how he's building his metaverse and utilizing the arts to actually be effective within the art space. James, would you like to chime in?
Yes, definitely. So as it relates to the role that blockchain and the metaverse play within arts or for creative artists, uh, is really about ownership, and ownership, not only ownership of assets but ownership of opportunity. We think about the transparency that the ledger provides. Uh, I'm going to say back in the day, an artist has a song, they have that song, but that file can be duplicated. So when we really think about what ownership means in this virtual space, and how those assets merge with the real with in real life space, blockchain provides that mechanism for ownership to be ensured. And because it's transparent, we can all see it. It's connected to your wallet. It's connected to your identity to some degree. That becomes central to kind of expanding the opportunity space within the metaverse. And without and blockchain allows for that, because it's a ledger that we all have access to. So for artists, they can go back and point to that minted asset and say, no, I own this. Also, artists can take those assets and build their communities around those assets in a way that was never allowed before.
Excellent. And what's interesting also, if I can add on to what you were sharing about the use of the arts and NFTs, I like to think of it of building legacy, because you're putting it into the metaverse. People can come in their avatar and actually examine the art. legacy. And also, because of the ledger itself, you know where your actual art is being sold, how much has been sold for. And what I like is the idea of having a percentage of that go back to the artist every time it's sold, because they, in art, there's value add. So, say for instance, a piece of art is created and sold for $5,000. The next person it might use the art may pay 7,000. So a percent of that could artist. That I'm because I see the technology as a level set. I see it as an opportunity for economic development and building out each of these economies, if you will, and actually pushing it to scale, because you're actually giving back to the original creator. So that's what I'm really, really excited about, the use of blockchain in the metaverse as it pertains to the arts. Just one example of how we could actually utilize this in a very positive way. In addition, we're creating a chain by carbon emissions. So we're looking at giving carbon credits because it utilizes a lot of energy, as well as other terms. James, would you like to add anything to that?
Um, I'm sorry, your mic was going in and out, but I was one of the points that I want to bring up is as we're talking about like applications of the metaverse and kind of the experience component. We look at what the emerging immersive experience is going to be, and how kind of that bridge is not just the metaverse on that you go to on your, the web based metaverse, but you also look at the role that AR, VR, and XR is kind of going to play within this. When we think about what blockchain will mean to those assets, all of those are just considered digital assets. So adding that ownership component to an entire experience, you can essentially add an ownership component to an entire experience. And once we think about what that's really going to mean, once we start integrating AI and generative art and create these very robust experiences, the for entrepreneurs, whether a creative entrepreneur or just a builder within this space, that ownership is going to matter, and that ownership is going to increasingly matter, because right now a lot of us are early adopters. So we're looking at these technologies and we're experimenting with these technologies, but as that experimentation continues to grow, the underlying asset, the underlying art, that has its own value. So when we think about like building for the future, or kind of instilling that wealth, the opportunity really comes in when you start to integrate the technologies, not only in manufacturing through blockchain enabled clothing, but other assets and opportunities. And the most important part about that opportunity is the communities that you're building around those assets. So an NFT is more than an NFT. It's a larger connection to a community. So what does that mean for an artist? It means an artist knows that, all right, I've minted 1,000 NFTs. I have 1,000 fans that I can continue to engage with, right? Like that level of connection. Prior, it was largely based upon whose numbers you have, what email addresses do you have. But within through tokenization and NFTs, what we're able to do is create this cross boundary where fans can have direct ownership in the artist, and then they know that the artists are going to benefit from that.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm off the chain as far as the possibilities of how the metaverse and blockchain can be utilized. I wanted to also bring some resolution to the idea of utilizing blockchain in the enterprise space. Oh, I talked about the hiring, the training, the development within the metaverse utilizing blockchain. Keep in mind that blockchain is it's still on the cutting edge of being a frontier technology, although it's been out there for about 30 years or more. It's still a frontier technology. And now we're looking at the maturity. I work with a working group through an organization that is utilizing criteria to actually gauge the maturity level of blockchain as it's used in enterprise. So, as these various industries are manufacturing and developing and creating, we can actually go in as technologists with our other hat on of integrating business and engineering technology to judge and to clarify, if you will, the level of security the blockchain has. It doesn't just go into cybersecurity, but it's a utilization of the process of blockchain. So it's quite exciting. I wanted to mention that. Next slide, please. So, as our key takeaways for today, blockchain is a building block on the metaverse that is interdependent as well as secure. How the digital assets actually contribute, and my colleague shared how they also contribute to the metaverse, these digital assets. The environment could be open or closed. And what's so interesting is most of us live in an open metaverse and we didn't know it. Understanding the metaverse elements, the applications, the implications, and the social media aspects and beyond is what we've talked about today. We'd like to open now for Q&A, and my colleague will join me for the Q&A.
Yep.
Great. Have any questions come across in DTX?
Yes. So we were talking about the blockchain not being altered and being secured. It seems like anything digital can be hacked or broken into. So what makes it so secure and not being able to be altered?
Well, as I shared, it goes through the process on that roadmap slide. It's shared, I shared as the transaction occurs in the digital space. It goes directly into a record of about the transaction, creating a ledger. From that ledger, it's validated, meaning it's you have a checkpoint. And the example that I gave were whether or not you have funds in your account. So that in itself allows for that validation. No one else has your exact identity, your code that is on your credit card. No one has the IP address that would be in the POS device. So those two combined build a very secure environment where the transactions actually take place.
Can I follow up on that?
Please.
So is not that the blockchain itself isn't the blockchain itself as an underlying principle, what makes it so secure is that is considered computationally hard to break it. So the amount of resources that would be required to actually control, because to actually control the block, you have to get up to 51% ownership. That in and of itself, because not only is each node competing against all of the other nodes, all of the other miners to actually solve that, the transactions happen so fast. So it's not that all systems have some vulnerabilities. The larger question is it is so computationally hard to actually hack the blockchain itself that is not even worth it. And that's kind of when we look at security. When we look at security or the pillars of security, when you think about, all right, where does this vulnerability exist? The vulnerability does exist, but the amount of work necessary to break those vulnerabilities is the key question. Is it even worth trying to break it if you have to not only maintain control over 51% of the block, but the actual individual blocks continue to change rapidly?
And keep in mind where those blocks are. They're at the intersection of that transaction.
Hmm.
So that code that I had mentioned on the credit card, that's the identity or that computation that James is speaking of. Within that code, there are algorithms that are very difficult to break. It's identity.
Okay. So one follow question. So it seems like now that fraud, that scamming, hacking, everything just rampant. It's almost accepted. When are industries like finance or health going to start to use some of this technology to make the data of the customers more secure?
James, would you like to take that? You can start. I'll
Um, I
dovetail.
think, yeah, I think for the most part, a lot of the major players, a lot of the financial institutions are already looking at these technologies. They're just not doing it directly in our faces. What they're doing is they're whether investing or supporting other startups that are really pioneering in this space. Of course, with the ultimate goal to essentially use that as guinea pigs. And to some degree, a lot of these organizations may not necessarily um, want to fully transition. I think that the future is going to be somewhere in between, right? There's going to be certain experiences that are going to be very much digital asset driven, but then there are also going to be some experience that kind of remain on fiat. But there everyone's looking at, if you're expecting to be around in 50 years, you're looking at which role blockchain and the metaverse and all of these technologies are going to play, kind of as you continue to grow and innovation continues to take place.
And a follow up would be I see the utilization of blockchain is very robust in the automotive industry due to the AI, the repetitive motion of the development of that particular um, commodity, of that particular product. And so there is great utilization and an acceleration in that space in the automotive industry in particular and the manufacturing. Remember, that was one of the sweet spots that I had shared.
There's a question in the chat. What are some ways that the metaverse can be incorporated into collegiate STEM education? Um, I think that one is already being kind of integrated. STEM City, if you look at what Morehouse is doing, there's a lot of universities kind of taking that first step approach to really introducing the metaverse to a lot of their students. Um, so I think not only is that going to continue to take place, but colleges and universities are going to look for ways to really expand their reach. When we look at open courseware where content is becoming readily available, content is essentially going to be the bloodline of of the metaverse. So you think about a lot of these immersive experiences, basketball games, football games, anything that one requires branding and two utilizes content. For the most part, classes are going to start taking place in the metaverse. Classes are already taking place in the metaverse. I think that we're just going to see a continued evolution of that. I'll pass it.
I completely agree. I shared that was one of the exciting points that we're beginning to really explore. And fifth wave STEAM education is something that is taking that on by leaps and bounds on a global scale because it lends for the reach, as James mentioned, into the on a global level that does not hinder location, as well as the subject matter, because you can utilize that opportunity of contacting any student anywhere on any topic and it can be shared. So definitely reach. And it's cost effective, it's a low cost, generally speaking. You need a system, but it's their cell phones in many parts of the world where you do not have a desktop necessarily or a computer. Any other questions?
I have a question. I don't know if anybody can hear me in the chat. So, in I guess this is more directed towards James, but um, I kind of caught on when you were saying how uh, we can use, or blockchain can be used in art to actually know your funds are going and benefiting the artist. Now, is there any way you could do that and not be an artist? Like, let's say, if you were, you just create your own blockchain type of GoFundMe or something like that. And
Hmm.
whatever artwork you do, and if it's sold, it's how you said it would be paid back to you, even if it's sold again. Now, is that something that anybody can set up, or would you have to, be pretty tech savvy, or
Yeah, I think that one, I would recommend everyone just go create NFT. Like for whatever reason, just create just to say you have it. And there's a lot of platforms, a lot of just very straightforward platforms. Cutline itself is we met digital assets to the Polygon network, but the process in and of itself really isn't that difficult. I've worked with I've worked with people that just want to create an asset, a small memento. I think that the asset component, when we think about digital assets, the value of that asset is largely implicate in how either you feel about it or your community feels about it. So for artists, we talk about an asset that could be shared throughout the community, because when we look at how artists really make money, they're larger brands. So then their assets are essentially meant to be distributed to their brand. But we also have assets. So maybe there's a family picture or something, some memento, right? And the value of that, um, the value of that is arbitrary. What's most important is that it's something that is transparently connected to the blockchain. So once you upload that asset to the blockchain, that asset is traceable, is trackable. So yeah, I would say anyone just take a JPEG and just go mint an NFT. If for nothing else, is you could go around and tell your friends, "Hey, I'm in an NFT." But the value of that for whatever community that you're engaged with is largely going to be dependent upon that community and how that community engages with that asset. And I don't want one of the misconceptions that we oftentimes have with digital assets and with NFTs is like, oh, it's just a picture or something. But in actuality, that token can provide access for communities. So on Cutline specifically, one of the things that when we meet with artists and brands, when we talk to them and they're like, hey, I want to launch a collection. Well, what's your collection for? What experiences are you going to unlock with that collection? And that's kind of where the metaverse and 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 NFT blockchain kind of come together, because that NFT that someone purchased can be used to unlock an event in the metaverse. But it doesn't have to stop in the metaverse. That same NFT can be used to unlock an in-person event. And when we start thinking about the intersection of the technology and the lived experience, that's where it starts to really become powerful. So an artist can do an event, and when they do the event, they can leverage the same NFT until the collection is closed, right? And what they're doing over time is driving value to that actual asset and then engaging their community in a new way.
It's about those 7 layers of experience that we shared in the metaverse. Well, unfortunately, we don't have a follow up time. So we're down to the last minute. I thank you for attending our session on why blockchain cannot exist. Metaverse cannot exist without blockchain and vice versa because they're interconnected. Thank you so much. I'm Dr. Janice Farrar Samani, and James McCoy is
Thank
my
you.
colleague today. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the conference.